What's up guys, Matt with Motorworks here. Progress has been made on the Accord. No, the bumper is still not on. Alrighty, so we have made some progress on the car. I did get some parts in. I'll just go over briefly what I got in, what I installed so far, and what I'm going to work on in the video today. And hopefully I get this thing down off the jack. It's on the jack right now. Hopefully I get it down off the jack and can take it for its first test drive. But let's go over what I got for the car, and then we'll go from there. Alrighty, so where we last left off, I didn't have the doors on yet because I was waiting on the door handles. I did get the new door handles in. These are from Amazon. They work really well. They didn't fit the best. I did have to modify them, but hey, for this and that doorknob over there, door handle, whatever you want to call it, I only paid less than 20 bucks. I think these were $17 for both of them. So less than $20 spent on both handles. They do the job. I did get the door panel in and installed. I also put in new front speakers because the old speakers were completely blown out. If you follow me on Instagram, you would have seen that those speakers are completely blown out. I think I mentioned it in the last video. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there are new speakers in there. And this is what the speakers look like here. They're just these JVC deals. I got a set of 4 speakers for less than $10 a speaker. Thank you, Amazon. I also got these connections here, and I'll show you why these are so cool and why I recommend getting this stuff when you're installing aftermarket speakers into your car. But yeah, the door panels are on. The car's smelling a lot better because I used one of the best air fresheners ever, Black Ice. You can fight me in the comments below, but I stand by my statement. These are one of the best smelling air fresheners out there. I have one hanging right there, full strength. But that's where we're at with the car. It is still apart. I do still have the seats out. I didn't get to the blower motor yet, but again, it is almost out. It's ready to come out. Stuff happened. Alrighty, so that's where we're at so far. I am starting to piece the interior back together. The last thing I really have to do before I can start putting the pieces back inside the car is throw these speakers in the rear. And I'm actually going to show you how I did it and why I recommend using these jumper harnesses here. But let's head to the back of the car, and I'll throw these speakers in back there. Alright guys, so we're back here. I have the speakers out, and as you can see, they are definitely blown out. They're completely shot, so these definitely needed replaced. And the cool thing about the speakers I got is they're almost a direct replacement. They have multiple mounting holes. Let me get those out of the box real quick for you. Alright, so I had the speaker out, and it just came with this protective little cover here. And if you look, this one here has 3 mounting holes on it. You can see, that's the factory one. This aftermarket one has a bunch of different mounting holes on it. Now I did this on purpose because I didn't want to have to drill extra holes in the speaker or make it fit into the stock mounting position. This has enough holes that when I put it in the actual housing, I have to see how this goes, it actually lines up pretty well with the factory location. So each little screw hole, when I configure it just right, has a spot where it'll mount. So there's literally no cutting, no drilling, none of that. And the speaker fits just like the stock one. I also made sure that it was a shallow speaker so that it'll fit in the same location and not give me any clearance issues. That was especially important for the front speakers because you have the power window that goes down, and you just don't want the window to touch on the back of the magnet here and cause you power window issues in the future. So that's why I went with this design. and it just turned out that it was really cheap. This was actually one of the cheapest speakers I could get. The factory speaker says it's rated at like 30 watts. This one says it's rated at 300 watts. I'm sure it probably isn't the best on the market. I'm sure there are better speakers you can get, but it was the closest to the original I could get without having to go and buy an original speaker. So that's the speaker I went with. Now let me show you why this package here with these jumper harnesses are so awesome. So there's a few things, a few issues you can run into with speakers, especially when you're going to an aftermarket speaker. And one of the biggest issues that I've always had with aftermarket speakers, I know I'm a little cramped here because I'm sitting on the seat, so sorry if I'm hunched over a little bit. The biggest issue I found is when you take these factory speakers out, they have a factory plug connection here, if you can see that. And the new speakers do not. They just have a two-prong connector there, just 2 pins to connect your new speakers. Now you have, in the past, you only had really one option, is you could just make this work with your factory wiring, and that just required cutting, soldering, or whatever method you did. A lot of people just took the wires, twisted them together, and put electrical tape on them. So did it work? Yeah, it worked. Was it clean work? Not so much. And I've seen in the past where people have had issues with their speakers not working, and 9 times out of the 10 it was because somebody just twisted the wires together loosely, and eventually that connection loosened up, or it shorted out on one of the metal parts on the body of the car. Whatever the case was, it just didn't work. So companies are now starting to come out with this, and this is a Metra kit. It's just the factory plug, so it's the same plug that's on the stock speaker, and all they did was just use this plug connector attached to 2 wires, because in addition to you having to cut and modify your factory harness, a lot of people would hook speakers up backwards, and they actually wouldn't be producing the correct sound, or they wouldn't be giving you the correct acoustics. They would actually be inverting the speaker instead of the opposite way, or the correct way. They would actually wire these up backwards. Yes, speakers need to be wired on a positive side and on a negative side. And again, the cool thing about this kit is it's worry-free, because on the speaker here, the positive side is the larger of the 2 connectors, and the negative side is the smaller of the 2 connectors. And if you look here, you have a larger connector and you have a smaller connector. So all you have to do to install this is plug and play, basically. You just plug that into the positive side, the larger side. Make sure it's a good solid connection, and then you plug this into the negative side. Make sure I got a good connection here. Good. Plug those in, then you just find your factory wire. Oh wait, I got ahead of myself. Then you fasten it to the stock location. Almost got ahead of myself. Ever happened to you before where you get so excited that you end up plugging it all in and then have to take it all back apart again? It just happened to me. So we'll just reattach this here. Alright, so if you look, again, it's right back in the factory location. I didn't have to drill a thing. It just bolted right on. So the cover's back on. So all we have to do is, again, Before when I got ahead of myself, I got to this point a little bit too soon. But all we have to do now is just take our factory plug and plug it into our harness here. And it's only going to plug in one way because it's actually slotted just like the factory harness. So there's no chance of wiring this backwards and no chance of hooking this up incorrectly. So that's why I opted for that kit. It was very cheap. I think it was also less than $10 for all 4 of those connectors. So very inexpensive, and it's definitely going to increase the sound quality of the radio over this. So, not looking for a super awesome rockin' stereo, just something that plays music and doesn't have snap, crackle, and pop going on in it. Alright, so the speaker's in. I just got to finish bolting this down. I'm going to do the same thing to the other speaker, and then I got to call it quits for a second. So the next time I put the camera back on, it's probably going to be pretty dark, and I apologize for that, but I'm trying to get this thing done, and the only way to get it done really is to work on it during the nighttime. So it's going to be a little bit dark. I don't know how much filming I'm going to do because I don't really know what you're going to be able to see, but after I get, accomplished what I want to get accomplished, I will do some filming, close this video out. But there you go. That's why I opted to go with that speaker setup. If you're looking to put speakers in your car, that's kind of the way I would try and install speakers in your own car. It's trouble-free, it's headache-free. It bolts right in, plugs right in, and it works brilliantly. It's the next day. I did get the interior installed, so check it out. The blower box, that was clean, free and clear. There were no animals living in there, so I'm actually kind of happy about that. I think a lot of the smell was just because this car's been sitting. There were a lot of animal hairs, either dog or cat hairs in here, so I think that might have been part of it. But once everything was cleaned, after I got it all freshened up, it smells a lot better in here, so not worried too much about that smell anymore. I think it's just something that will go away eventually. But funny thing happened. I went to start the car so I could hear these awesome speakers in all their glory, and started the car up. It was a little slow to crank. It's been sitting for a little bit since last time I ran it, so I wasn't too worried about that. It started, it ran. Went to turn the radio on, and it turned on for maybe a second or two, and then shut off, and my tachometer stopped working. Nothing else other than that happened. It just shut off, and I couldn't get it to turn on after that. Tachometer stopped working, and figure, okay, I'll just recycle the key, start it up, see if I at least get my tach signal back. The radio, maybe I figured maybe I blew a fuse on it or something, but that wasn't the case. Turns out my battery's not charging, so it's just something else I have to fix. It's always something. It's the little odds and ends. Sometimes it gets frustrating, but it's stuff you got to deal with. I also noticed one other thing too, and I'll take you up to the front of the car now and show you. So I have the battery charging right now. That again, I was running the car for a little bit, and that kind of wore the battery down. But the other thing that I noticed is my radiator, if you can see here, is actually leaking coolant, and it's leaking right around the seam of the radiator. It's pushing all out around the seam here. So the only fix for this is another radiator. Now the good news about the radiator is I have a pretty much brand new radiator. I have one that's only a year old that my buddy Carl gave me, that was out of his accord. Remember the car that I was jumping on and smashing with my buddy Carl? Yeah, he gave me a radiator out of his accord, so I do have a fairly new radiator to put in its place, so that's not the big issue. The big issue is figuring out if my charging issue is due to a bad alternator or a bad ELD circuit in some form. Now you may be saying to yourself, what is an ELD circuit? And it just stands for electronic load detection. And basically, back in the 90s, they do this style setup on the newer vehicles, but back in the 90s it was kind of a crude system where they decided, hey, your alternator doesn't need to work all the time. I mean, there's times when you barely need battery power, so why don't we have a load detection system detect when you're using a high amp draw versus a low amp draw and regulate the voltage through the ECU. Brilliant idea. So it saves you on a little bit of fuel economy because it doesn't have the alternator working as hard, so it doesn't have to take as much energy to spin that belt. But on a car that's, you know, now approaching its 30-year anniversary, this car's 30 years old this year, on a car that old, these systems start to fail. So a lot of people would say, hey, just throw a new alternator on here, but it could still leave me with the same exact no charge problem. So what I have to do is first go through it and make sure that it is my alternator that's bad and not the electronic load detection system. So it's just another thing that's gonna take time, gonna take energy, but I am going to try and figure that out. I'm probably gonna leave the video off here because I gotta let the battery charge, and again, it'll probably be late by the time I actually get back out here to work on the car, because by the time the battery charges and I run some tests on it, it'll probably be later. If I pick up the camera to give you an update, I certainly will, but if not, that is going to do it for this video, guys. We did get the interior in the car. We got all the speakers in the car. It's clean to my liking. Again, I didn't make it perfect because it's going to be something I drive around anyway. So I got a majority of the big stuff out of the way, cleaned up the doors, you know, cleaned up the interior to my liking. And, you know, we're coming down to the wire. There's just, you know, there's few last little things that are really fighting me to get this car done, but yeah, I'll figure it out, and when I do, you'll be the first to know. And sorry to say, it's probably going to be in another upload, so that is going to do it for this video. Thank you for checking it out. Thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing. We'll see you in the next one.